Hello and welcome to the special series on EV Talk. Talk EV, that's the hashtag you can use while posting your questions. Electric vehicle has become one of the most exciting area where startups or new age entrepreneurs are debuting. What has really excited them to leave their stable jobs and get into this rough or up and down phase of startups where you have to struggle to get some investors, you have to build a business plan that is going to be sustainable. There are a lot of questions that they have to answer before their debut. So we have here 6 such startups who have taken step in this direction, and we also have a lawyer who can answer what are the legal aspect, how can you really start this company, what are the legal topics that has to be addressed before you get into this space. So let me begin with the introduction of the panel today. I'll start with you.
Hello, my name is Vineet Bansal with EV Motors India Private Limited. We are focused on primarily setting up the charging infrastructure here in India.
Hello, myself Akash Kaushik, CEO Eucleon Energy. We are developing batteries for electric vehicles, charging stations, and most of the energy storage systems. And as Mr. Nabil has asked, like, what made us to just be in this scenario of EV segment, which is like very initially started. That's what, like, we are a set of individuals who studied, researched, and worked abroad, and we got back to India just with an insight, like, we will break the stereotype, like, we can't say while being abroad, like, India ka kuch nahi hoga. So we are here to just make India.
Hi folks, I'm Paritosh. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Benling India. So being the expertise in Chinese market, I've been staying in China for more than 15 years, and with the same experience, I want to explore Indian market as well. We are manufacturing electric two-wheelers and hope to catch you soon in the market.
Hi, I'm Nishant Seni, Managing Director, Triple E Taxi. We provide mobility as a service. Since 2015 we started in Delhi NCR, and we've recently launched in Hyderabad also, making green mobility. Thank you so much.
Hi there, this is Maxon Lewis, and I am the Managing Director of Magenta Power. And under the Charge Grid brand, we are setting up charging infrastructure here in India and also in the battery swapping space. And with 20 years of experience in the auto and the electricity industry, and I'm personally responsible for 10,000 megawatts of electricity production in India and abroad, but decided to make a clean sweep, as they say, and get into clean energy, and hence Magenta Power. And thank you for bringing us here.
Hello everyone, I'm Badri Narayanan. I'm a partner at a firm called Lakshmi Kumar and Shidharan. For the last 10 to 15 years, I've been advising manufacturing and auto companies on various issues, legal issues, tax issues relating to setting up business, manufacturing, and taking things forward. And I'm here with all these exciting new age entrepreneurs and to learn something from them.
Hi, I am Kshitij. I'm one of the co-founders of Gorini Mobility. We make electric scooters by the brand name of Gemopai. We are in this business to basically for a better tomorrow, and making EVs now for the past 2 years, in this business for the past 3 years. Hopefully one of our scooters should be with you already. If not, we'll be with you very, very soon.
So this is really fiery startup gang that I have brought in. They are so excited. They have done a bit of work in this space, and they are now excited to take the plunge formally and launch their vehicles. They are here to provide the services like electric mobility services. We also have charging infrastructure providers. So it's a complete set of ecosystem that we have brought in today. If you have any question, you can put it in the comment section. We'll be happy to take up. Before we start, let's get into the first thing, that is the legal aspect of starting a startup in EV space. Mr. Narayanan, how do you see, what are the main area or what are the main questions that these startups or those who want to debut into this space need to answer?
Thanks, Nabi. Like you said, there are different types of startups. And especially if you're going to be starting up in the manufacturing space or in the space where infrastructure is an important component, you need to plan a lot more carefully as compared to, say, setting up an information technology or an app-based startup. Okay, because here you have to build real assets, and real assets typically means you need to be able to plan what are the regulations, what are the laws, and what are the things that you need to comply with. India is a very complicated area when it comes to the legal aspect of it. The first thing that you need to have is a clear business plan as to what you're going to be doing. Are you going to be in the manufacturing space? Are you going to be in the B2B space? Are you going to be in the B2C space? And what is the kind of roadmap that you have for the purpose of doing, and who your customers are going to be? Once you've had that idea, key thing for you to understand, for example, is what are the legal issues which are going to be coming up, which are going to be there. So, for example, if you're going to be in the charging space, and if you're going to be setting up charging stations, then land is a very important component of this. So, you need to be able to understand how you're going to lease the land, where are you going to procure it from. If you're for example, in the business of setting up e-mobility for the purpose of being able to service customers, then who are your customers and where are they going to pick up these cars and where are they going to drive it from? So do you need, for example, taxi permits at airports, for example, or do you need to go into areas where you need permission for the purpose of being able to park, being able to handle? If you're in the manufacturing space, for example, you need to comply with Factories Act, you need to comply with the labor regulations, you need to comply with various other laws. One of the areas which is most important for you to make a determination is tax. So extremely important, and the government is coming up with more and more incentives, especially under FAME 1 and FAME 2, for the purpose of being able to encourage the tax system to encourage you to do so. So for example, that's one area where income tax incentives as also GST
electricity put together. So we started 3 years ago. I was with Accenture Management Consulting and talking to a lot and trying to bring in improved solutions. And then the idea struck that why not do it ourselves? And that's why we set up this company in the EV charging space. And as we moved along, we found that when we started, the ecosystem didn't exist. People did not even know what EV stood for. It was very difficult to explain, hey, a car can move without petrol and diesel. And try to talk to people about a concept like this and set up a company or a business plan around it was a bit difficult. But I think we stuck our ground. We realized that there's a lot of work happening in the international quarters. But what we realized is getting those international solutions and bringing them directly into India didn't work. India is a place where you need to build for Indian challenges, Indian solutions. And to build an entire ecosystem. So these are the two views we took. We identified that in the entire EV ecosystem, we wanted to play in the charging or enabling the movement of vehicles rather than the vehicles, and that's the space we decided to. And it has been a great run since, and today we find a lot of support really.
I want to understand, why did you choose to be a service provider? You provide electric mobility service. Why not manufacture? Because many have debuted in the manufacturing space. Shortly, a short answer.
Okay. Because our background is we do finished vehicle logistics for all the auto OEMs in the country, from their respective plants to the dealers and the RSOs. So we thought we do the goods mobility, why not go into passenger mobility, looking at the space that there is so much corporate taxis, fleets which are doing this through IC engine vehicles, and because of the choking conditions of the city, we thought to go into electric vehicle mobility as a service space for this to contribute towards the environment. Thank you.
So you have experience in China. What are the key learning that you have brought in from the China and started Belling Motors, and why did you choose this? If you could give us a crisp answer to this. We'll start taking questions shortly.
Oh, thanks for the introduction first. So yes, being in China has been always a era where I have learned a lot and I have understood the market in India as well. So talking about Chinese, if we talk about the learning part specifically, yes, the government support which has been coming across from the Chinese industries, we have seen Chinese government coming up with a lot of subsidies into E4-wheelers, E2-wheelers and 3-wheelers as well. More above than that, the end user part, if I talk about the consumers, they have a very swift, whenever the change comes, the crowd there, the people over there have the ability to learn the new things and can adopt the new things, which has been always a crisp where I believe an Indian era can also take.
So please post your questions in the comment section. We have all these startup young talks here. They are going to answer all your questions. What were the difficulties while they were contemplating on it? How did they finally debut? What were the hindrances that came over? all kind of questions they are ready to answer. If you are also planning to take a plunge in this space but you have certain unanswered questions, they are certainly going to answer. Before that, I take up your questions, I'll move to another expert that we have. What has been your learning so far and what did you do?
So, Euclion is a subsidiary of Bharat Power Solution. We initially started in 2013 for redefining the segment for the lithium-ion batteries. So, as in all, we have an experience of manufacturing lithium-ion batteries from last 10 years. In 2017, we started Euclion with an aim to export batteries to Europe. That's why it stands for European Union Customized Lithium-Ion. And as what we are doing, we are exporting it to Spain and other countries for robotics and other application.
So we have one of the most promising startups in EV ecosystem. If you have any questions, you also are contemplating to be part of this buzzing business opportunity, then you can post your questions. We have a legal expert, we have the people who have been doing business in this space for a long time. We have here with us Mr. Bansal, who is managing director of EV Motors, one of the startups that is manufacturing vehicle. Why did you choose to be a manufacturer rather than a charging provider or other part of the ecosystem? What made you think about this?
Yeah. So I think one of the things I do want to mention before I talk about manufacturing vehicles is that when you're a startup, you have to be very nimble in your thought process and flexible. So initially, we started off 3 years back to look at manufacturing buses and primarily focused on ultra fast charging technology. But I think as a startup, one has to recognize that market entry is very important, and you also have to look at sustainability and viability of your business. So as we are moving forward, we have changed our strategy slightly, and right now we are more focused on creating a charging network, because that's what the country needs first. And I think as we move forward, we will look into batteries and also manufacturing of vehicles.
So we have another vehicle manufacturer, Gemopai. They are ready to roll out their scooters. Let's understand from him how excited is he about it, and what were the hindrances that he has to deal with, and how confident is he of his business going forward.
So we've already rolled out. We are in sales since last Diwali with our first model. We are rolling out 2 more models before this Diwali. Okay, see, manufacturing two-wheelers is very different to e-rickshaws in the sense that you are actually responsible for somebody's life. So you have to have the manufacturing standards which are with any manufacturer. Today you cannot do the same business the way e-rickshaws have done business. So accordingly, we've set up a line for 150,000 units every year. It's a state-of-the-art line. We are making sure that each and every product that rolls out of our factory is a quality product and is excellent for the user. He gets reliability, he gets a quality product, and plus the already rolled out model is a Euro certified model, so you get the same quality in India.
So now finally we are going to take up the questions from our audience. So we'll first take the set of questions that were asked in advance. So the first question comes from Mr. KK Gandhi, who is executive advisor with TVS Motor. He asks, what changes would be required for meeting the Indian driving and climate conditions and its impact on the range and life? I think you will be the right person to answer this.
I think the others could as well, but I'll take a shot at it. So India has 2 issues. One is heat and humidity, which are natural climatic conditions which impact the battery life, and also the charging time and cycles. So I think what is required is to understand that whenever, I'm talking from a charging infrastructure perspective, whenever you're talking about charging infrastructure, you need to condition your charging infrastructure in such a place that you're managing these. You cannot have open-ended, open-to-sky kind of solutions. So these are some of the small tidbits we have. Now, as far as the vehicle is concerned, I think the battery pack, we need additional cooling, and I think a lot of work is happening across startups trying to identify how the battery packs can be cooled more efficiently, because what works in European countries where the ambient temperature is a lot lesser may not work in India. And the second important point in India is regional specific temperature variations. We've analyzed it that the same vehicle and the same charging in different regions would be absolutely different. There's a variation of around 40%. And these considerations need to happen from a charging infrastructure and also from the vehicles that are being deployed. And I think that's where I end my answer in trying to say these need to be considered. And
So we have another expert who can add to this.
So, as being iterated by Mr. Maxon, the thermal management stuff, yes, that's crucially required. For the same sake, we have developed 3 different technologies, including the liquid thermal management and the phase-changing material, which has been developed by us and Chalmers University, Sweden, in collaboration. We are working with Oak National Laboratory as well, just to develop things for the thermal management. The concern which is more crucially required is the awareness of stuff, which should be spread among the environment and ecosystem, the user, which isn't there. People aren't aware about the pricing, people aren't aware about the usability, people aren't aware about the safety concern. These has to be liberated in advance before the consumer have these kind of stuff, which is specific lithium-ion batteries.
So adding on to this, being an EV manufacturer, I would believe the adequate battery management system, BMS, which is right now we are importing all from outside, BMS and the cells which we're going to import as in lithium-ion cells, these two would be the most important part which all the manufacturers have to concentrate, have to focus on. Right quality and right safety measures would be the first and prior thing to deliver you the right product, I believe so.
So this was the question. Another question comes in from India director of Dassault System, one of the leading German simulation provider. How do the new age entrepreneurs develop EV plan to develop technology for new product development, for conceptualizing their vehicles and services when it took more than 20 to 30 years for existing OEMs and suppliers to develop in-house capabilities? So how are you going to deal such kind of complexity in such a short time?
Yeah, I think one of the things, technology is very important for any startup to be able to survive and compete in the market. So you have to have some kind of a technology edge. And even though the products, so our thought process is that you have to take some off-the-shelf products, and really you cannot, there are two things. One is from an invention perspective, and one from an engineering perspective. Our view is more from an engineering as to how do we take a product and engineer it to meet the needs of the Indian market. Primarily, the biggest thing that e-mobility needs is thermal management. I think that we have talked about and discussed here. So how do we establish a cooling system, and how do we do the modeling behind that, and how do we customize our solution to meet the requirements here? I think that's one of the key things from our perspective in terms of when we're looking at developing our products is how we are working on.
So next question comes on the automobile retailing side. Mr. Bharat Bedi from Vellore asks, as an existing automobile dealer, my revenue is dependent in workshop more than sales of a new car. With the introduction of EV, services is going to be a very less requirement of service is going to be. So how are they going to be profitable? How the dealer's role is going to be different from now? How do you see their viability?
So obviously we cannot compete with the Hondas and the TVS now, as of now. As far as margins are concerned, we give better margins than other manufacturers. Plus, you see, the amount of space requirement for a EV workshop or a EV store is much lesser than a store for a conventional vehicle. Plus the spare parts storage, everything overall, it is a much less investment. Today, when we open a normal internal combustion engine store, we are looking to invest anything over over a crore as a dealer, while if you're looking at an EV, you can start off with 15 to 30 to 45 lakh rupees on the maximum, depending on the place. So the ROIs are very, very stable. The business is going well. We have around 50 dealers. Most of them are profitable. And that is the way forward. We give better margins as far as the initial sale is concerned, and better margin on the spare parts also, on the accessories also. So business-wise, it is not an issue at all. The dealers would be profitable with starting from the first year itself, because obviously the space requirements and other requirements are much lesser than a conventional vehicle.
So I think one of the points as a dealer, and I understand your view, is what happens to my business? The EV is coming, dress up parts. I think we need to agree to the fact that the model is changing, and it is going to, and you need to be ready for it. So while a certain element of the service part will reduce, but there's a ecosystem view which you can take, because EV is not only a vehicle, it is also a machine, intelligent machine, and it requires a different kind of working with it, a different kind of service factor, which also means there is a lot of upskilling which you require. So maybe today your revenue per unit or per time is X. Because of this skill upgradation, it will be much more than that. And I think that's where the transition has to happen, and you have to, and all of us have to be ready towards that transition soon to come to us.
So before we start taking the live questions from the Facebook comment, one last question from the advanced set of questions that we received. This is a person from Satara Yantra Udog, Pune. He want to understand what are the challenges, because he sees charging infrastructure to be biggest challenge. How are you dealing with it? How viable this business segment is? If somebody wants to take a debut in this area, how lucrative, how attractive it is?
So, indeed, charging infra is required, and it's not in very abundance around the ecosystem. So just to have a sense of security to the user, maybe it's an electric car. You recently have seen Hyundai Kona has been launched, and they have provided 3 years of roadside assistance to you, so that you feel secure. Like while being on road, if you suddenly get out of energy or juice, you can have a mobile charging system along with you. We have developed such system, and this system has been deployed by us only in association with Allianz. So this is something which is needed to be provided as of now, as when we have shortage of the infra, we give the mobile support to the system, so that the user feels secure enough while being on the road.
Nishant, you are a service provider, so you are the biggest user of this charging infrastructure. Can you tell me, is the ecosystem really ready, and do you think you are satisfied with the kind of services being available to you?
Okay. So when we started in 2015, the ecosystem was not ready, and even now it is getting there. However, it doesn't stop us to start the e-mobility space, because sometimes you have to take a plunge. You have to take the cars, because it is a chicken and egg situation. If I don't take the car, then the charging infra guy will say there are no cars. Why should I set up the charging infra? We did take the cars. We set up our own charging infra till the time it was not there, and there, we have been trying to connect the dots throughout. Now, EESL or various government initiatives are coming out to set up new charging stations. There are many experts here who are setting up. We are working really closely with them. We are sharing heat signatures with them, where we tell them that this is where our cars are going to be stationed around. This is where we need. So it's a lot of joint collaborative effort which needs to go into the system to set up a charging infra for the asset utilization. Thank you.
So those who have just joined us, you're watching Talk EV, a special series on EV ecosystem. We are joined by bright minds of the EV startup industry. So now we'll take up the questions from the Facebook comment section. So first question comes from Anubhav Rawat. He says, I want to know how EV will help curbing pollution, given the India has a lot of electricity production coming up from fossil fuel. Do you really see that we will have the answer of that continuing growth in pollution, because we are home to 15 top polluting cities? How are we going to deal with that?
Hi, I think that's a very important question. One thing we have to recognize that the effect on the pollution is only going to be on a long-term perspective. For that, you do need a larger penetration of e-mobility. First, there's a large number of electric vehicles that have to be on the road. The second thing is to provide the energy for this, you do need renewable energy. And this has to be complemented by renewable energy rather than increasing fossil fuel. And India has a huge initiative to support renewable energy. I believe it was 175 kilowatt by 2023, and now it's increased to 227. So that itself is there to kind of support the e-mobility initiative, and it's going to take some time. I mean, first of all, we have to put the vehicles on the road, we have to create the infrastructure, and then we start seeing the effect on the system.
So one request to the audience, please ask different questions so that we do not repeat the questions, so that we have the opportunity to take and include maximum number of questions. So another question comes that we do not have adequate electricity. That another viewer or reader, Vilas Patre, asks, how are we going to support EV ecosystem in India?
I think Electricity could be converted into solar charging stations also, in case if we are power deficit. Even when we go into power surplus, the grid supply has to come into play. Even if there is no grid supply, there is a lot of push into solar. So a complete clean energy can be put into the system. A solar charging station could be set up, a storage can be done, and a EV can be charging through the solar storage. We are very far off from vehicle to grid system as of now, but tomorrow if we are energy surplus, then the vehicles can also supply the grid the electricity required.
So other very common question that is coming from the consumer, or that is the largely perception of the market as well, that we largely import from China, assemble it and give it to the consumer. Do we have really internal capability to develop such electric vehicle, and how can you convince a market which is already full of this perception?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. That for any new technology, there has to be a progression in terms of how the manufacturing takes place in India. Yes, China right now controls more than 95% of the world market as far as EV is concerned, and it definitely has a supply base which is already established. So I think we need to look at how do we learn from some of the things that they have done successfully, and also some of the things that they have not done so well, and look at how do we create this ecosystem in India. So there are three major components. You have to have the charging, the batteries, and the motors. The three major components. And India has the technology, and plenty of motors are being manufactured here in India. It's just a matter of looking at what to engineer for the motors specifically for the need here. On the batteries, lithium-ion battery, yes, there is a shortage of cell manufacturing is something that needs to take place. The Indian government is trying to promote that with the 40 or 50 gigawatt initiative that is out there. So I think over a period of time we will see a lot of manufacturing and made in India taking place, but it is an evolution process, and we have to go through the pains of creating that infrastructure.
That was Mr. Manish Bhansali's question that was being answered. Next question is from Srisha CV. How can the Indian auto component manufacturer align themselves to EV market? How are the EV manufacturers looking to utilize the vast auto component manufacturers? They provide 5 million jobs. They have over 30,000 components. Do you think you can accommodate them? I'll ask all of you this question.
Yes, definitely. We can obviously accommodate them as we increase scale. Obviously, all of these things, like we've localized the battery, we've localized the charger, we are trying to localize whatever we can, but it's a catch-22 situation where you have to be selling enough vehicles for that localization to be happening at a price that our scooters, electric scooters, are as competitive as a IC. It's as simple as that. If we try to localize right now without the numbers, then we come in at a price point where we are more expensive than the IC, and people are not ready to accept that. So we need to come in at a price point. But eventually all of these things will happen. People are accepting EVs. They are more reliable now. They have better performances now. So people are changing over. When changeover happens, everything. India is a country where localization can never be an issue. You can get anything and everything in India. You can make in India. You can manufacture in India. We believe in that, and we will be doing that over a period of time.
So those who have just joined it, I must tell you, you're watching special series on EV, Talk EV. We have entire ecosystem, as well as we have a legal expert who can answer all your legal queries. If you have any legal queries on how to start, what are the legal issues that you need to deal before you can get on. Badri, of course, this job problem is going to create a lot of legal issues also. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think so. One thing is that we are in an age of disruption. So all of us are doing that. And let's be very honest. This EV, the number of components required vis-a-vis the requirements with respect to manufacturing an IC engine-based product is vastly different. So there's definitely going to be a disruption. But I also feel that there'll be a lot more last-mile connectivity and last-mile services that will be required in EV. So that's where I think the balance is going to come from that point of view. Legally, I see a lot of changes are going to happen over the next few years. The government is very, very keen on doing what it did with wind energy and being very successful with it, which was a lot of incentives given and coming up with new models and encouraging people to do more things. So I think over the next few years we'll see a lot of legal changes to accommodate this.
So you are watching a special series on EV ecosystem talk EV. You can post in your questions. Meanwhile, I keep taking questions from the audience. Next question comes from Masoom Kumar. He asks, what is your view on the availability of lithium, cobalt, manganese, etc., which is used for manufacturing of lithium batteries? There are news that we do not have local our global or abundance of material. We of course we do not have except a bit of manganese that we have. How are we going to deal with that? Is it not that we are going to shift the import bill from one point to another point? What is the basically we are challenging the status of EV coming into existence because we were about gung-ho about it, because we want to deal with the heavy import bill that comes from import of crude oil.
Very interestingly, I'm taking this question, but this is one question which comes all through. If we go EV, we are going ahead back to China in terms of, and other countries who currently own a lot of the rare earths. So here's my response to them is technology is changing. LiFePE4 really doesn't require cobalt, which is one of the assets. Second, there are new countries which have realized the potential of these rare earths and are opening up their minds at this point in time. And for sure, I know that yes, the government of India is not sitting still. There's a lot of discussion which is happening in that space. So there's going to be two changes, I believe, which for at this point in time, I don't think that should be the question. The question, we have not reached such a scale that we start to challenge, hey, will we or will we not have rare earths, etc. Right now is to set up this ecosystem. Meanwhile, allow the government and other companies to build up, one, the technology which transitions from a lithium ion to another technology which is available in India. And secondly, also allow government and other organizations to build that asset. And I believe that what we discussed today as a problem, 3 years there's going to be a solution coming through. And there are other experts in this place who I believe also look at that. So my pushback to these people who always come with the question is, we are going back, we're changing the fuel bills from here to a lithium. The answer is no, not yet. And by that time, I think for 3 years' time, allow startups like us and others to come out with technology solution. We'll find a technology answer, and other institutes to find a asset answer to that.
So before I take up next question, my supplementary question, beyond lithium, are we thinking what is the possibility of going there, and how far are we from there? Something that we have available in India like sulfur ion or something of that sort.
Perfect. I wouldn't claim that I am a chemistry expert, but yes, the transition is happening. At this point in time, as we stand and talk, there are close to around 10 or 15 organizations which are working on supplementary solutions, both in India and even abroad. And these are non-lithium based systems. If you look at the periodic table, there are other better fluorine based technologies, etc. But stability is an issue. But those, once you have the solutions to that, I think we will not be having these conversations. So the supplementaries are happening, but I believe that it's 3 to 5 years before we say, hey, yes, we can let go of lithium and come into a non-lithium based system.
But it is possible that we can lessen the dependency on. So we have another question coming up from Vishal Damecha from Gujarat. He asks, we have just started up design of electric two-wheeler. My question is, what legal things are required for commercial production? Second question is it good to assemble manually for initial phase?
I think the first thing that you should do if you're in the design thing is to file a patent application or a design application. The most important thing is to protect your IP. That's the first thing that I would do. The second thing is whatever regulations required for the purpose of designing, for example, if you're going to do it in a factory, if you're going to be doing on a mass scale, or you're going to be doing on a very small scale, you need to get the required labor as also shop establishment, factories and related office requirements to be taken care of, and there are consultants who will take care of you. Talk to your local chartered accountant, he'll put you in touch with the right persons for that. The next thing that you need to take care after that is being able to figure out whether you're going to do manually assemble this and then do that. It's a good thing to start at least as manual this thing. The requirements are much lower in law. The one thing that you need to be very careful about manual as also this thing is warranty issues and subsequent claims for product liability. So there are two things which are big. So there'll be, for example, India is now encouraging a lot of product recalls It's also doing a lot of things. So make sure that your quality parameters are there to ensure that you can manage this transition. So that's really what I would say. All the very best. I think you're doing a great job.
So next question, that is the most pertinent question, looking at India cost. So this question comes from Dennis Campbell. He asks, the audience of two-wheeler is very price conscious, and the scooters of electric scooters cost being in 1 lakh, 1.2 lakh rupees. How are you going to compete with ICE scooters which cost 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 in that range?
It's really a wonderful question to ask. So to be very honest, yes, in the current stage, if you talk about the EV two-wheelers, the costs are quite competitive. But to start with, we have to understand the ecosystem have two different categories of two-wheelers in electric, which is one, low speed category, which doesn't require any licenses, any registrations. So these are the vehicles which could be used by anyone into the ecosystem, let's say the women, housewives, students. So these are the vehicles which we manufacture with the very lowest prices of somewhere like from starting from the range of 40,000 and between 60,000. Talking about high speed, yes, the costs can come up to say 1 lakh or so, but we have different models coming up, different variants of LFP and NCM lithium-ion batteries. Whereas if you're using the technology, depending on the technology, the quality of the product, we can manufacture the vehicles, high-speed vehicles, starting from the range of 75,000 to 1 lakh. Again, we have government subsidies, subsidized by FAME2, as well as some of the state governments, like as in Gujarat, like as in Delhi. We have state governments subsidizing the vehicles, the end users, to buy, to encourage the sales and buyers to buy more and more electrical vehicles. So yes, we have solutions in both the ends. One, the low speed vehicles, which comes around at the price of 40,000, and then the high speed, which depends on the technology, can price you somewhere between 70,000 to 1 lakh rupees.
Certainly you will have a price difference as of now, but going forward in next few years you might have the price of an ICE scooter and EV almost equal. But before I move to next question, I have Mr. Badri who wants to contribute to this.
So this is very important because a lot of manufacturers ask me this very question, what we should be doing, because the pricing is going to be there. So in the short term, there is going to be a difference between the price of an IC scooter vis-a-vis EV scooter. So what the first thing that you need to think of is, you should always, in the consumer's mind, it's not just the upfront cost which is important, it is a cost over a period of life. So generally the statistics is that the EV maintenance bill is much smaller as compared to the normal scooter. So the first thing that you need to kind of market is that it is not just the upfront price, but the price over life. And Indians are very conscious about that. So they understand why Maruti is bought in India is because the cost of maintenance of Maruti is much lower over a period of time. That's the first thing. Second, the government of India has given now in this budget announced that if you're going to take a loan for getting an electric vehicle, the interest which you're going to be paying on that loan will be available as a deduction. So that kind of makes it more interesting for purpose of doing so. Similarly, they're also having incentives for electric manufacturers of such vehicles. So that's going to reduce the price which is going to be there and improve the liquidity for you to be able to purchase these electric vehicles. But yes, I would suggest that the way to go about is to kind of talk to them about the entire cost of ownership rather than just the upfront cost, because upfront cost will always be a little higher as compared to the upfront cost in this market.
So I will take a short break for about 10 minutes, but before that I will take one last question. And before we go to break, this is Can Jacob. He wants to understand, how are we going to dismantle this huge amount of batteries? Is it not going to be another source of pollution, earth pollution and various other pollution that it will cause?
Great question again. We have to understand that the battery in a vehicle and the end of it doesn't mean the life of the battery is dead. There's always a second life to the battery, which is actually which is another extended life. One, so we need to find purpose for the second life batteries. Second, I think at this point in time, the recovery of lithium is pretty less, but the technology is improving. There's new technology for recovery from chemical and non-chemical processes, and that's going to happen. So I think we should not try to address the issue of battery recovery right now, how to extend the life of the battery, and in the next stage, the technology to recover. I think that's going to be the solution, short term.
We missed taking out some question from the previous session. Let me start with that. The question is from Amol. Amol asks, as disruptive startups, how are you able to attract talent from an otherwise traditional automotive sector? That's a big question, needs to be answered. I'll come to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think one of the things I do want to mention is fortunately the EV space right now in India is one of the most sought after industry and space. So I think in terms of trying to lure talent, there are several individuals who are looking at trying to see how they can get into this space. So for us, it has not really been that a challenge so far. We have been getting a lot of inquiries from different individuals who are wanting to be in this space. It's an area where it has attracted a lot of interest, and fortunately for us, so far we haven't had any issues in terms of trying to get people on board for us.
Indeed, the shift from automotive to electric vehicle is happening. The problem here is initially people used to have a thinking electric vehicles are more feminine kind of a stuff. No one thinks like they are masculine. Now this has been changing. People believe like there is a formula car which can run faster than anything. So this is shifting. This mind shift from feminine to masculine has given a edge over how to shift from automotive IC engine to electric vehicle.
So the challenge of talent is really huge. What are the key, challenges that comes when you are hiring people or you're bringing people to the board? What are the key questions asked that is difficult for you to answer?
Sure. So I think one thing is the EV shift. The talent that we require in EV is more intellectual and less manual. I think that's so. What happens is now we're talking to a group of people who are personally also aspiring individually. So I think what is happening is the standard models of hiring don't work in EV. That's what we have realized. The standard way of finding people doesn't work. Most of our hiring happens over coffee tables. It's where we try to understand what are the aspirational values of that individual. Some of the difficulties we are finding is the same question, how, while everyone knows that e-commerce and other startups have actually taken off and there's a sustained business model. In the EV, there is no sustained business model. So when the hiring happens, there's a higher element of risk. And how we manage that risk when we bring up the talent is one of the biggest questions. So it moves away from pure numbers on the table to how I can assure you a guaranteed employment, which is also aspirational for you. I think that the conversation has actually changed for us. That's how we are looking at it.
So let's come back to legal aspect. When we start a company, there are various legal aspects that come to you. You face with them. What are the key such challenges that you have faced with, and how are you dealing with?
So see, basically all the compliances in India are not that easy, so will be the right person to actually answer that. But today, obviously, whenever we are coming up with a product, we need to get the trademarks registered, we need to have our patents filed, we need to protect what we are putting out there in the market, we need to have everything registered. Then there are a lot of compliances to running a factory, to doing everything. Then obviously there are a lot of liabilities when you're a manufacturer of a EV two-wheeler. So we have to keep all of that in mind. We do all of that, but obviously if we are looking for legal advice, we also go to legal experts, and I think sir should be the right person to be answering.
I think you covered all of those points. The one thing one area where this has a huge impact is on pricing. So getting the system efficient and getting the legal compliance done in such a way that you're not going to be hit by non-compliance and fines and penalties in the future, or where a company is going to be stopped or you're going to be not be allowed to operate, is extremely important. So be compliant. Second is, don't miss out on any incentives that are available to you. Fight for it and try and get it as much as possible so that pricing can be taken care of.
So there's very interesting question that has come up, and for this I need to change my position and I'll have to ask from here. Mr. Darshan Soni, he asks, how many of you who are present here in the panel really own an EV? Please raise your hands. Okay. So how many of you two-wheelers? All of you two-wheelers. None of you have car. You don't own an electric vehicle. Why?
Very soon I'm going to be owning one, but not as of yet.
So, Mr. Soni, your answer is been there, and you have seen that they don't just talk about EV, they believe in EV and they're using EV. Next question comes from what about power supply that has already been covered. You can see our previous episode that went live a while ago. So another question is from Pratik Bhatia. How advanced are Western countries with respect to EV technology adoption? What are the possible avenues of technology transfer between India and Western countries? Who is going to take this question? Okay.
So I think the question needs to be restated is don't look. Yeah, that's what I say. Because the EV adoption has happened at a different part of the world. And I think it's important to see where. So the India model is going to largely follow the China model because of one, the population, the way they have structured it. So I think, but let me answer your question. The first time ever, 3 months ago, more EVs were sold in Scandinavian countries than petrol and diesel engines. So that inflection point has been touched. From a technology and an adoption perspective, I think what has happened is mobility itself has changed. So be it the likes in the European countries or even in the US, the adoption, and some of the companies are leading that. Some brands have become synonymous with EV, which is a great thing. So there's a positive narrative. But my answer is the technology which is for India is not going to be the technology from Europe or other. It is going to be technology from either China or inbuilt in India. That's my response, really.
So those who have just joined in, this is a special series on EV ecosystem, Talk EV, and we are joined by experts of 5-6 startups and one attorney who is going to answer your legal aspect. My question to you, have you seen the patent problem in startups has been a lot? How one can be sure or can be conscious about it so that they don't make these kind of mistakes, that they get into legal entangle in the starting of their business?
So, very good question. I think this is something which a lot of startups ask us as to what is it. One of the first things is that we as startups love to talk about ourselves because we want to promote ourselves. And the first thing that you should not do if you want to protect your IP. Okay, so one of the things is that very early in the process, even before you've had a finished product, once you have a good idea of what the product is going to be, you should file for a patent application and design application. Very important, so that you start that process. Second is people want to file in every country in the world a patent. It's too expensive. So figure out 3 or 4 jurisdictions that you want to file and make sure that you're doing it properly. Third is spend money on getting that right upfront, because I find a lot of startups, what they do is they go to the person who's not a patent expert, draft something and then do that. Many times patent and IP is only value remaining in the company if the business goes south. So invest in it. I'm not saying that you spend huge amount of money on it, but keep that as part of something which is an investment rather than an expense for the purpose of the company.
So I would like to understand from you how difficult is it to have the technology in EV space, especially when it comes to charging infrastructure or battery manufacturing, and what are the potential technology or methods that a startup can adopt which is economical and that can be suitable for India?
So as being talked about startup, certainly we have seen there have been several revolution or initiatives by government in last few decades regarding solar integration, solar panel manufacturing, chip manufacturing, but none of them have succeeded, and the basic reason was no R&D behind. So we encourage every startup, they should start their initial aspect with the R&D phase. They should import some technology or develop some technology in collaboration with some IIT or incubation center that will help them to just re-establish themselves in a better position so that they can be a successful startup, contrary to what has happened to solar industry.
Yeah. One of the things from a technology perspective, the way we are looking at this is more in terms of engineering. So, and adoption of a technology. For example, for batteries, one of the things we believe is that ultra fast charge, or there's a charge rate, so 2C to 4C charge rate, is what is required for not only India but globally. That can help you to charge batteries less than an hour. So our focus is primarily driven to look at technologies which are 2C charge rate or higher, and then how do we look at developing batteries around these cells, and how do we engineer a pack around these cells. So that's how we are looking at it right now. It is going to take time, and for any startup, it does take to develop a product and go through the regular testings before you can actually launch it.
So you're watching Talk EV, a special series on EV ecosystem. We have here 6 startup people who are going to answer all your questions. If you want to take a plunge in this emerging business and you have some confusion, you have some answered question, send in our comment section. We'll be taking up and answering all the questions that you have from our expert team. Coming back to you, what again we talk about the technology. What are the most probable, most economical, because China has been a champion in this space. What has really worked here and that will not work here in India, and what are things India tuned to for scaling this business here?
Right. So if we talk about the technology, so development of any of the parts which has been used there in the EVs is a big task. Unless we don't have the real spectral numbers, volume which has to be there in the country. Developing a particular part, developing the molds, developing the technology would be the rarest part. So if I talk about China, with the numbers growing, they have multiple molds, multiple technologies, multiple parts which they have developed inside the country. Initially in India, yes, India have all the abilities to to do the things internally, to bring the technology by itself. But for the present time, it would be a difficult part for India to bring on the technology by themselves. With the numbers coming, with the volume growing, with the government's interest, which right now we already have, day by day, manufacturers like Sir is there, and all the other part manufacturers, assemblers, they'll be coming up with the technologies and their own molds. So yes, if I talk about the ability, India already have the abilities. To talking about China, they have got their own manufacturing setups, they have got their own technologies, which right now we are going to utilize by from them only. And later on the stage, with the time passing by, we'll be coming up with better technologies as well.
The next question, probably the most important question, is acquisition cost is very high. Why did you acquire an EV? You could have done, because ICE engines are very low cost compared to EVs. So how does it make sense for you? How operating cost is better, and how are you utilizing that?
Okay, I'll take it in 2 steps. Why did we acquire EVs? Because every Diwali, when the city is choking with pollution, everybody goes to the hospital and they don't mind paying 1,500 rupees to the doctor and 2,000 rupees for the antibiotics. So we are more health conscious rather than the cost conscious. All the import bills and all those things is a cost, but life is more costlier. So I think that is one which everybody has to take into that aspect. Second is, if you sweat the asset more, the gap between the IC engine acquisition cost and the EV will be figured out. So we have already done 5 million kilometers. So if you run 2,000 kilometers every year, you would already bridge the gap between the IC engine and the EV in 1.5 years. And with the government fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, that gap is going to get lower by day.
So you're watching Talk EV, and a special Facebook live series on EV ecosystem. We had 6 wonderful startups who have answered all your questions. We'll bring in another series of EV Talk soon. Stay tuned to ETAuto. Thank you so much for watching ETAuto live series.